Okay. So yeah, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We're going to be using the chat function for people to ask questions as well. So throughout the event, if you feel that a question arises, please feel free to put it in the chat, and then we'll use those later on. So again, welcome to this special online event. I guess we've termed it, David, an online introduction or sort of book launch. And in, I guess, is it the 22nd, you've got the physical book launch, which is happening, slightly delayed due to COVID. I know, David, tickets for that are still available, aren't they? So people can still sign up. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so David has released this superb book called Leadership for Sustainability. And today we're going to take an hour just to explore the contents of the book and use it as a bit of a catalyst, so use it as a stimulus for discussion. And it's great to see lots of the familiar faces, and there's also lots of people actually from places I've not had much contact with. So it'll be really good to share ideas, and there'll be an opportunity later on for us to have a bit more of a discussion, particularly based around a panel that I'm going to introduce in a minute. But before we get going as well, I just wanted to introduce the organizations who are involved in organizing this event. And it's a bit of a partnership. So we've got David and his publisher, who have lent support in terms of organizing this event, and particularly helped in terms of some publicity and creating some of the design content. But what we've also got is I am representing the Ministry of Eco-Education. I'm the education lead for this project, which is all about bringing teachers together to help support, share best practice, and embed sustainability across the curriculum. And we've been working with 15 primary schools over the last year, and helping them to embed sustainability, using and bringing together lots of the great resources and opportunities that are already available to schools. And it may be that this is something that you are interested in terms of gaining support and accessing the resources and all those sorts of things. One thing I'd say is that we're really trying to help rationalize all of the opportunities for schools and really embed them within the curriculum. So hopefully that might be something that sparks people's interest. I'm also then just going to hand over to Jess, and Jess is just going to introduce the other partnership organisation of the UK Schools Sustainability Network, and I'll just bring her in here. There you are, Jess.
Hello, thank you, Paul. Yeah, brilliant to collaborate on this event. I'm a big fan of David's book, so really looking forward to talk about it with everybody today. So yeah, I'm Jess Tipton. I run the UK Schools Sustainability Network. Been doing that for a few years now. It started just as 2 schools in London. I think a few people here are UKSSN members or collaborators, in fact. So we're now an umbrella for over a dozen regional networks across the country. And they are designed to bring together students, teachers, and now operations staff as well, who are already working on sustainability and environmental education, designed to bring them together so they can connect, they can collaborate, they don't feel alone, we can share resources, we can support each other. A lot of us went to COP26 in November, and you might have seen some of us around in various events and initiatives. So the regional networks are all grassroots, largely run by volunteer teachers in their spare time, which is quite a tall order. And then UKSSN itself is hosted by GAP, and we've got Tony here today as well, who helps run UKSSN. So my background is as a languages teacher. So I was teaching MFL until the summer, and I have worked for DEFRA as well, Department for Environment, but I'm now Head of Youth Networks at Global Action Plan. I've got a slide I'll put up in a minute, because it's got our emails and socials and stuff on it, but I look like a bit of a ghost, so it's a bit weird. And I think Tony might put some links in the chat as well. So if you're not already a member of UKSSN, then do drop us an email to our mailbox, and we can see if there's a regional network to connect you up with, or perhaps we can look into setting up a new network. And Jack's here today, and he's one of the students from UKSSN who's doing work experience with us this week. So really pleased to have him here as well. Thanks, Paul.
Great. Cheers, Jess. Thank you. So, David, we're going to spend about 10, 15, 20 minutes handing over to you to give us a really kind of deep introduction into the book. So I'm going to hand over to you, David. I'll get the slides up for you.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you very much for hosting this. Greatly appreciate that, and also thanks to Jess for all her support with this virtual launch and the actual launch, the in-person launch on June the 22nd in London. So thank you both for that. So what I'm going to do is to take you through some main areas of the book, some main themes, and some thinking behind why I've included them and why I wrote the book in the first place, really. Just to give you a very brief outline of my background, I was a head teacher for 20 years of 3 primary schools. All of them were in areas of quite severe disadvantage. And I was very keen to have sustainability as a central ethos of these schools because my background was environmental education. And when I went to college, we actually trained in that area. And I was a subject specialist, and I had my first subject of responsibility called environmental education coordinator. So things have moved on since then, I know, but I've retained that, and this is why I was really desperate to include sustainability within all the schools that I led. So to give you some outline then, one of the thinking behind the book, or one of the pieces of thinking behind the book, was that I really recognized that head teachers, and this may seem obvious, are really the gatekeepers to everything that happens in a school. And so with this in mind, I wanted to try and convince others, once I came out of headship myself, of the merits of sustainability, not just in terms of it being an eco thing, but it being a good thing to have in a school for school improvement as Ofsted would understand it. And so this is one of the misconceptions that people have when they look at sustainability. They think it's all about greenism. And the book argues that this isn't really the case at all, and it should be really embedded as a school improvement device as much as anything else. Now, it can also help to save the planet as we go along, which is an added bonus. And usually you'd put that the other way around. But I think for hard-nosed head teachers and leaders who have everyday challenges in terms of operational problems, etc., then you need to say, well, this is a way forward on all levels, not just the eco one. But one of the problems that I encountered as a head teacher, but also when writing the book, was sustainability in the round is really an elusive concept, because it does actually include everything. It is literally life, the universe, and everything. And when you're trying to argue that we should embed sustainability in schools, it's often the case that you're arguing against quite a nasty system of interminable growth, which is part of our economy, that really is simpler to understand, and everyone, even if they don't realize it, is probably signed up to. So you're actually going against the grain a bit to promote sustainability in the way that I would advocate. But once again, I would say that it's linked to all sorts of other things, such as well-being and creating a sustainable future for everyone. But that leads you to the next problem, which is, what really is sustainability? What does it mean? So these are some of the words which sprang to my mind. We've got a bit of a typo on the first one. But things like time immemorial, lengthy, prolonged, lingering, I don't know what lingering is, everlasting, extended, protracted, lasting, continue over time. So when people start to explore this in schools, I always want to try and encourage them to think philosophically about, well, what the hell is it? You know, what is this sustainability that we're all trying to embed? Okay, we want to sustain the planet, we want to save the planet for our own civilization, but what is the time scale? Just, you know, what is it? And when you start to think about that, then other things start to spring to mind. And the next slide shows that really we're looking at big timescales. So if you imagine the history of the world as a 24-hour clock, then if you see where humans arrived at 11:58 and 43 seconds, you can see that really we're Johnny come latelys when it comes to being on the planet. But if you think about, and then if you go on to think about, well, how long has industrial man or human been on the planet, then that's even less time. It's an infinitesimal time in terms of the time of the planet has been in existence. And yet we've wreaked all sorts of tremendous damage within these short years that we've actually been operating in our economy in the way that we have. And although this is stating some of the obvious, if you start to look at it in these terms, then you start to realize, first of all, the urgency of sustainability as a civilizational device, but also the fact that we need to get on with it. We need to sort this out sooner rather than later. And who better than people in schools? And this is my main argument, because our whole economy, as I keep saying, is not sustainable. In the UK, we roughly use about 2.5 planets worth of resources a year, and that is patently unsustainable. And you hear about the slogans that say there's no planet B. Well, that's true. There isn't a planet B, and we're using our planet up faster than the planet can replenish itself. And we're not the worst country by any means. So we've got to be thinking in terms of some science here and some inconvenient truths, to coin a phrase from Al Gore, that we can't go on as we are. And it's not as though it's delivering happiness either. It's delivering unhappiness and social injustice across the world. So what better way of altering it than through education? Because our planet is literally a Goldilocks planet. There's sort of Earth system science here at large. It's developed in a way that it sustains life really well. In fact, the life and the non-life on the planet is a system in itself. And as you may know, the Gaia Theory says that it's an organism in itself. It's a huge organism that sustains life, and life sustains life, and so it goes on. And if you look at our near neighbors, you've got Venus with runaway global heating, and you've got Mars, which is as cold as ice, literally. We're very lucky to have what we've got, and we're messing it up big time through our actions and our economy. So it's good to look at the Earth system science just to get some reality checks, but and to realize what context human beings are within all this. And one phrase which the thing about what we're doing is we're using up this fossilized solar energy. It's been laid down within all the fossil fuels over millions of years, and yet we are using it up once again in a very, very small space of time. It's no wonder our biosphere can't cope. And if you look at the circled Earth up there, that's the same scale as the sun in that picture. It just gives you some idea of the immense energy which we're releasing into the atmosphere, into the biosphere, that's causing all the havoc with climate change and all the other problems that we've got. And it is down to our culture. It's the progress culture, and it's a phrase which I came across from one of the popes actually, called rapidification. And this is why our whole civilization is based on unsustainability. And this is where we need to think this through and think, well, okay, if this is unsustainable, what is sustainable, given that we haven't been on this earth very long? And some of this can be quite frightening to confront, and this is why lots of students end up with anxiety, quite understandably. But what I argue in the book is that there are lots of positive stories out there that can be replicated, and that schools can act on their own and in unison to actually create a better world, literally, in the physical sense as much as the mental sense. Another thing which I mentioned actually in the book is to try and reinforce the fact that the rapidification is just unrelenting really is that my grandmother was born in 1903, which dates me quite a lot. But in 1903, that's when the Wright brothers first had their first powered flight. By 1969, there was jumbo jets flying across the Atlantic and further afield. And the wingspan of a jumbo jet is the same length of flight, roughly, that the Wright brothers did in 1903. And my grandmother had to wait until 1928 to get the boat because she wasn't property owning. So this is another way of trying to say to people, things have changed really rapidly. We can actually change rapidly the other way so that we become sustainable, but we have to start altering the culture, the toxic culture that produces all the toxicity that's actually ending up in the biosphere and ruining the world for everyone. So one of the things I was in, this cartoon actually sums it up really nicely. I think it's better than I could ever explain, really. So just have a quick look at that. I think it's a brilliant cartoon. And it sums everything up. So one of the things I explore in the book as well, that I explored to get a handle on some of this, to try and think, well, what is the way forward, and what are other perspectives on how we can live our lives, was to look at Indigenous people. And Indigenous people can teach us an awful lot. They weren't hung up by progress, for one thing. They were actually more hung up about sustainability. And I did some research that showed that one particular tribe in North America talked about 14 generations. So it was the 7 generations before and 7 generations after, with us in the middle. So you gained wisdom from the preceding 7 generations, and then you use that to help you provide for the 7 generations going forward. And that to me was very powerful. And it made our perspective on generations very feeble, really. We talk about leaving the world fit for our children and grandchildren, but that's small beer, really, isn't it? If you start to think of it from the Indigenous perspective, then you can start to really give a new perspective on the whole existence of our civilization. And then I looked at, well, who today is looking further forward than we normally look forward. And I came up with the nuclear industry, because they're looking forward a couple of thousand years, because some of the nuclear waste will still be toxic in a couple of thousand years' time. And they think, well, how can we communicate with human beings, given that there are human beings in a couple of thousand years? How can we communicate with these human beings so that they know that this waste they may have come across is toxic? What language will they use, for instance? So all these things have helped me, and obviously, and hopefully within the book, help the book to give a new slant on things in order to try and take things forward. So it talks a lot about the linear economy and how damaging that is, the take, make, use, dump economy that we're all caught up in. And the question is, do schools contribute to this? And usually the answer is yes. As much as anyone else, as much as any other organization. So how can we alter that? How can we do something about it? This is where some of the positive messages of the book come over, because it's also a toolkit for showing schools how to wrench themselves away from a linear economy and into a circular economy, which is something which is sustainable. So I won't bore you with all the ins and outs of that diagram, but in a nutshell, it's all about trying to minimize waste. It's trying to see nature as cultural and natural capital, and valuing it and making sure that what we're doing is helping to regenerate rather than to diminish. And we can do that through many, many ways. And schools are in a fantastic place for doing this. So as I said, I show how this might happen within the school situation. The other thing that I've emphasized within the curriculum section of the book is that the valuing nature, and so that getting children out into the nature environment, natural environment, so that they begin to value it. Because if you don't know about nature, then it's very difficult to value it. I think David Attenborough made this comment, over many years. And so many children are isolated from nature. And if schools continue to isolate them because they don't value it themselves, then that's a big deficit. So it's using forest schools and other means to get children out there, getting down and dirty with the natural environment. The other thing that I've emphasized in the book is the concept of embodied carbon. And that's where you have carbon coming back via the stuff that you buy. So the UK government have often said, the UK has been fantastic at reducing its carbon footprint because we've cleaned up all our industry and the carbon levels are way down. Well, that is sort of true, but often it's because there's the heavy industry associated with it has died. And what we've done really is to import it back via places like China and other places in the Far East. So we've not really diminished our carbon footprint that much. We're just buying it back via the stuff that we purchase. So every time you buy something, especially from China, you're just importing some of the carbon that they've produced in order to get that product to you within the product itself and the transportation. So that one of the concepts that I explore with people reading the book is the hierarchy of needs. And it's really saying, well, schools, do you really need this? Can you use any materials or equipment in other sorts of ways? The concept of thrift comes into this. And I know that I described in my last school where I used to, at the end of term, especially the summer term, when there was lots of waste thrown into a skip that we used to order, I used to jump in the skip and start to throw things back out again and say, well, yeah, I think you ought to use that, or you ought to mend that, rather than throwing it away. And the staff thought this was highly amusing, but it was done with effect, actually, to make them understand that we needed to use less stuff. And so the book gives all sorts of ideas as to how that can happen. And also I tried to show that it's not all about carbon footprints, water footprints as well, associated with production, particularly of food, but production of any kind is there's a water footprint associated with it as well as a carbon one. And so showing how schools can reduce their water footprint alongside their carbon footprint is also a way forward. And one example I gave was taking over the school catering at my last school and having a vegetarian menu, and that in itself really helps the carbon and the water footprints. But other things like reducing water usage in the school by various means, all sorts of things. But all these sort of handy hints are within the remit of the book. So looking at sustainability then in the terms of social, environment and economic made me realize that it's not just about the green stuff, as I said earlier. It's not just about greenism. It's about our culture and our economy. And you can look at it in terms of 3 pillars: social, environmental and economic. But I think the most useful thing to do is to look at it in terms of the integration of those 3 elements. And then you can see that within school, you can have knock-on effects, positive knock-on effects, by altering how your school operates within those 3 realms of sustainability. And there are lots of examples within the book that show schools how to do that. And I use a model for that within what I call the curriculum, campus, and the community. So it's sort of 3 C's, which show how you can operate a school along sustainability lines. So I think that, here we are. Look. So you've got the curriculum, the campus, and the community. And then within these 3 sectors of sustainability, the environmental, social, and economic, you can see that in the triangle sides. So the way that you operate all those 3 areas are, of course, integrated. So you might do a food topic, which is helped by the way you run your catering, etc. And there's another C, which is just as important, that leaders have to employ, and that is C for connections. And I asked the question, sometimes when I'm doing workshops. Well, what's the connection between a pop-up toaster and a dolphin that lives in the Yangtze River? And of course, when I ask children this, often they'll say, oh, they both pop up, which is a great answer. But my answer, which is only one of many, is that, well, the connection between the freshwater dolphin and the toaster is that the toasters, cheap toasters, are made by Chinese industry on the sides of the Yangtze River, and the pollution from those electronic industries are polluting the water and killing the dolphins. You know, so if you buy a really cheap toaster from Asda, you are complicit in killing freshwater dolphins. So, you know, getting people to think in these terms and to get into the habit of doing audit trails back to where things come from is a good curriculum learning device, but it's also a good thing for leaders to bear in mind when they're purchasing or how they're operating the school. There are knock-on effects with whatever you do, and you need to make connections. If you're running a school in a certain way, it might be detrimental to people's mental health. There are all sorts of things which you need to join the dots on. So within the environmental, social, and economic, here are some examples that I've just asked Paul to put up there. So just have a quick look at those. But they're not mutually exclusive. So you might say, for instance, have some microgeneration, some solar panels, but that might help economic sustainability because it procures local trades and supplies. And you can make connections between multiple connections between all those three elements with whatever you may do. And if you anticipate them, then you can make more of them. And that's another message of the book. Look for opportunities. There are a lot out there, and they're very positive. If your school does contribute to the community really well, you might be helping fuel poverty, for instance. You might be helping the community to grow more of their food, or to cook more of their own food. There's a multitude of examples within the book that show how these three elements link and what schools can actively do that ultimately helps their curriculum and the learning of the children. So we've used the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure many of you do, and that's another way of indicating what your school does and can do. So I've used those to good effect within my schools, and I also link them to what are called 10 sustainability doorways, which are listed there. So buildings and grounds, that's the school estate. Energy and water, I mentioned some of that. Travel and traffic, lots of schools have travel plans. I know Paul and his other manifestation deals with a lot of that. Procurement and waste, all these things schools have power over, and there are all sorts of fantastic and interesting things you can do within the school to help with all those elements. And this is the 17 SDGs. I just did a sort of random list of what we did in my last school to cover each of those SDGs. And as you can see, we did a lot for each of them. If you want to have a look at the video to do with the Guardian, that's available on YouTube, but that was the Keep It in the Ground campaign. So if you Google Keep It in the Ground campaign, then you can see the video that our school contributed to that was designed to persuade Bill Gates to disinvest from fossil fuels. And so the other C of captaincy is really the crucial thing for sustainability to be embedded in a school. And so there's lots of advice there for leadership for sustainability. One of the things which I advocate is that leaders need to get away from just accepting things as they are. So this shifting baseline syndrome you need to get beyond that. And there's a great cartoon from a local cartoonist actually who does cartoons for the Guardian that shows this, Simone Lear, and that's why I include that cartoon in the book. The other thing which leaders need to get away from is boiled frog syndrome. And as you may know, boiled frog syndrome is where if you put a frog in a vessel of water and it's cold, it's quite happy. And then if you start to heat it up, it doesn't notice it. If you plunged a frog into some boiling water, it certainly would notice it. And what I say is that leaders in schools, and not just schools, but leaders in schools in particular, I think some of them are boiled frogs because they've been in the system. The system has sort of boiled them up without them noticing. And it's another way of saying, step out of the system to re-look at it. How can we do it in a different way? How can we operate schools in a different way without losing our jobs? And that's the bottom line. I just stuck this slide in because it was a slide I used in workshops years ago. And I thought in these horrible times that we're in, it just shows what we're fighting against. We're not just fighting against horrible despots who are killing people by war. We're actually fighting against mindsets which are also unsustainable. And this is why we've come unstuck with buying Russian oil and gas in Europe, which is a big subject in itself. But one of the main messages of the book is come out of your bubble. Don't be a boiled frog. Get out of shifting baseline syndrome. There is a better way. And that's one of the positive messages. And I think we are moving with the times. If we look, we are looking at sustainability, and you may poo-poo the DFE sustainability and climate change strategy, but it's a hook to hang things on. It is legitimizing sustainability in schools. And even though there might not be any money in it for you, you can always quote it and use it because there is quite some good stuff within that strategy. And it's a way of saying to whoever, whether it be an Ofsted inspector or whoever, we are delivering on the DFE sustainability and climate change strategy. Aren't we good? And I think that's to be welcomed. So as I said, one of the main messages is leaders to do something different. And the main thing that I don't want leaders in schools to do is to be the problem, to be the barrier to enthusiastic members of staff who want more sustainability, not just members of staff, but students, pupils, parents, governors. There's a big upswelling of goodwill for schools that want to embed this, and leaders need to grasp this and have the courage to do it. And that's the other C, that's the last C of my C model, if you like, courage. We all need the courage to do it. And I include this quote from Satish Kumar to end the book. I'll just leave you to read that because I think it's a very good summation of leadership for sustainability. And I think if we can live by what Kumar says, then we can actually save the planet one school at a time. And there's the cover of the book. And I would encourage people to have a look at it and also to flash it in front of their senior leadership, because there's a lot in there that will help them to deliver school improvement on many levels, the way that Ofsted sees it, as well as someone who might be just looking at it in terms of greenism and that side of things.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for that kind of concise introduction and throwing together of all of those ideas through the book. What we've also put together, and I'm going to put it into the chat now, is we have a shared Jamboard, because we wanted to use this event as an opportunity also to hear about the great things that are already going on in schools. So please have a look at that and add a post-it note with just one single thing that you are already doing in your school. And it might be a really good platform or avenue for people to be able to see other ideas, as well as the book itself. We're also now going to move into a little panel discussion. So I'm going to just pull in a couple of other panelists and introduce to you. We have Jack from, now Jack is a year 12 student from the Somerset Climate Justice Network. And I'm just going to bring him into the conversation. Let me just pull Jack in. And then the other person I am going to invite in as well is Hannah Tomling. And Hannah is an early years practitioner from Diamond Wood Academy. which is one of the schools that's part of the Ministry of Eco-Education. And hopefully this is going to lead to a bit of discussion. We've got some questions that people have put in the chat that we'll pull from, and also we've got some questions that people have added in advance as well. I'm just going to have a quick look and see what people have been adding so far to the Jamboard. At the moment, the Jamboard is blank. Hopefully people can access that. I can see we've got about maybe 15 people in there. Please feel free to add a post-it note with anything that you might already be doing at a school, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so excellent. There is a post-it note going in, so please, yeah, feel free to add to those. So one of the first questions we've got is from one of the teachers in the UK SSN network, and what they were interested in was how can parents and students help to influence senior leadership? Has anyone got any great ideas of how parents and students can help influence senior leadership? Who would like to lead with that? David, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I think one of the things is to just emphasize that, as I've said several times now, it's not about just greenism, because people think that it's all about just eco schools and growing more vegetables in the garden and this sort of thing. And all those things are very good and very creditable, but it's about school improvement. So you can say to your school leaders, really, it's about enriching the curriculum. It's about making your students and your teachers happier. So you're going to retain staff and you're not going to have so many mental health issues. There are many ways that sustainability can deliver school improvement benefits, which is above and beyond just being green, and to arm yourself with examples of that so that they can start to join the dots for themselves. Because for the uninitiated senior leader, it might be completely off their radar. So it's a matter of awareness raising through knowledge of areas of sustainability which the senior leaders may not have thought about.
Okay, great. Hannah, what about yourself? Have you got?
Yeah, I mean, we've really got, after COVID, we've really embraced parental contributions. And on a Wednesday afternoon, I'm lucky enough to work with a mental health charity within school. And what we've done is we've looked at getting outdoors to improve mental health with parents and in the community. And we've given them sort of little workshops that they can take away ideas. So we have done things like foraging walks, outdoor cooking, wreath making, bug hotels. So they spent some time with the children doing the workshop, and then they spent some time with Amina and Elizabeth, where they're talking about the benefits of getting out into nature. And I do think after the pandemic, a lot of people, we couldn't go out, could we? So, you could go out for an hour a day. So I think that's really helped them. And especially with me working in nursery, the children that have just started with me now, over 2/3 of their life was COVID. They're our youngest children at 3 years old. We work really hard at Diamond Wood to make sure they're engaged with nature. They're growing I know Paul follows us on Twitter, and, you always comment on, we really get the children outside. We engage them with nature. We're growing our own vegetables. They're finding out just the simplest things like lying on your back and looking at the sky and looking at the clouds and engaging with nature, so that they know as they become older children how to embrace that in their curriculum. And I think our curriculum through school, because we have the same theme running up to year 2, everybody's working on the same thing and getting those parents involved. When you see our afternoon nursery has about 46 children. We did an outdoor workshop all about butterflies and caterpillars. We had 26 parents come in, and we're all engaged. Our senior leaders came and looked at what we were doing and know the importance of that, and know how that parental involvement, like you say, will help you. It's not just about being an eco school, it's about being a school that has parents as partners as well.
Excellent. Yeah. So Jack, what about from a student perspective? Have you got any stories to tell about influencing the senior leadership?
Yeah, I think so. With obviously, I can't comment on the parenting experience, but with students, it was finding what is school missing and what can we see that leadership are aiming for, and how can we fill that gap. So I know from my point of view, my secondary school had quite a bad reputation when I started. It was not a positive place. But when they could see that students were passionate about a project, they invested time and resources in that. And it turned out that it actually helped the school's reputation, and it helped create a better environment around the school itself. So it's finding about what are senior leadership looking for, and how can students sort of work to fill that gap, I think is what I'd say.
So this is almost like being clever, using the priorities of the senior leadership as a way to hook in these other initiatives so that things are achieved, even though then it might not be explicitly around an environmental lens, or, you know, so sort of going around through the around the back door. What about Jack? Another question that one of the teachers has submitted in advance was, as a student, how do you feel like your friends get the sustainability aspect, or as a student you often feel a bit like a kind of lone wolf within the school? How does that dynamic work?
I think at first, definitely, it was very much a sort of, I felt a bit on my own. And then slowly, as you start to sort of build up a reputation with, especially with our environmental club, we went from 7 students to 23 in a year. So building on that and publicising our work really helped. As well as that, working with UK School Sustainability Network really gave us that sort of connection with other students, and you can really see how it's happening across the country, and students are really passionate about this.
Hannah, what about from a teacher perspective? Because I know a lot of teachers will say sustainability, yeah, I've got so many other priorities. I can't have this, is just one thing too many. How do you find it from a teacher perspective?
Yeah, so I know when I first met you, obviously you'd got the Ministry of Eco big questions, and I was saying to you, I can't just ask my year 1 and 2 staff to take this on board if I'm not doing it. But what I think we found is if it's harnessing that passion, and because we run our nursery from the world aspect, it goes through the children in school, and because the children are passionate about it and go on and on at the teachers, it comes through, and we've really looked at our whole school curriculum to make sure things like our values and themes are all embedded. So we have a theme of sustainability. We have a topic that is the great outdoors. We look at inspiring people and things like that. And because we are such a good team, I think as well, it all comes together. So it's not an add-on. It's not like, oh, we'll just go do the birdwatch because Mrs. Tomlin said we have to go do it. It's, oh, we're doing the birdwatch, and it'll be in maths, and it'll be in science, and it'll be in our outdoor time. So it's not just an extra thing, it's part of who we are at Diamond Wood. And I think that's really important. It shouldn't be seen as a little bit you do on the side.
I think, David, that really fits into that like all those C's as well, doesn't it? That sense of it being a holistic whole school. David, I was going to ask you about the broader, like, sort of tidal wave in some sense. Do you feel like there's momentum? I guess also in terms of what's happening more widely in society and general public in terms of attitudes towards environmental kind of initiatives and sustainability, particularly with your book being published, do you think this is a wave that's going to come through?
Well, I hope so. I think that the thing that is reinforced in my mind is that there are various doorways into sustainability that schools can take. So we've all heard about and experiencing the energy crisis at the moment. Well, schools are going to be hit very badly by that if they haven't been already, just through energy bills. So I know some schools that they're using that as a way of instigating behaviour change within the schools, so that they start saving energy and start to look at ways in which they can, say, use renewable technology or whatever it might be. But they've also incorporated it into the curriculum and helped the the community as well, because the community can see ways in which they can save energy, helping fuel poverty, as I mentioned, and other aspects, which all go to help quality of life at the end of the day, as well as saving money. So I think it could go either way. I think in some ways that we have got all these seemingly intractable problems like the energy crisis, but it actually does link to sustainability really well. And I think an astute leader in a school could capitalize on that. And I think then we can keep sustainability on the priorities, rather than everyone thinking, oh, we just need cheaper gas bills or something.
What about then this new DFE strategy, the sustainability and climate change strategy? Do you think that's another, like you were saying before, quote it, use this as something to wave in front of senior leadership? Do you think that's another piece of evidence, along with the book and all these other initiatives that are happening?
Definitely, it's got to be a bonus, because the DFE have eschewed all these sorts of things. When I'm old enough to remember when a previous administration wanted every school to be a sustainable school by 2020. And then when the coalition government came in 2010, that all went out the window. But it does legitimize what we're doing an awful lot more, I think, within schools. And so I would definitely not be sniffy about it. And I think there are some good recommendations in there, even though they may not be financed, even though Ofsted still, aren't part of that discussion in some ways. It's still, as you say, a good excuse to implement aspects of sustainability that may have been absent in the past.
Yeah,
Jack,
I think.
sorry, Hannah. Yeah, no, you jump in.
I think as well, going back to the policy paper, what I've been looking at as well is aspirations for green careers. So even with the youngest children in school, because I'm science leader as well, we've been bird watching today. So I've used the word, we've been an ornithologist, and I work in a school where over 40% of our nursery children are pupil premium. We have about 17 languages, but we want it to be all that oracy. We want it to come through and have aspirations to want to work outdoors, to want to work in nature and things like that. And I think that's really, really important. So today we've set up a bird hide, and we've had the binoculars out in the spotters guides, and to say some of our children are just 3, they go get a crate, they go get a milk crate, which is being reused, sit on it, they get the binoculars, they get the spotters guides, and they are bird watching. And they're not just saying it's a bird, they're looking which one it is, I think if those children do that, I think that's really important.
So sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's experiential learning par excellence, isn't it? And it's good pedagogy, and that's where sustainability within the curriculum can be a massive strength, because it's motivational, it's hands-on, it engages the children emotionally. It's all things to all people, really.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, I was going to give you a chance. I know that the UKSSN have published a sort of response to this document, to the DFE strategy. I don't know if you wanted to share some of your thoughts around that and how useful it is.
Yeah, so I actually worked on the strategy. I was on the youth panel, which helped after the draft strategy launched at COP. I then helped to share students' views to finalize that strategy. And I think I also wrote in our response, and I think one of the terms I used was that it was a great starting point for a green revolution. It's not perfect, it's not at all what I would have, but it is a good starting point to give schools that way into sustainability. And I think from there, we need to make sure we're building on that as schools, we're not just doing what the strategy says, we're doing more, which I know is not the most easy thing, but students like me can then take that on and hope to progress the strategy, I think.
I'm just going to bring in the Jamboard so that you can see what some people have been putting in, because I think kind of a theme that's coming out of this is there's so much that we can use to help make small steps and begin normalizing and embedding this. And there's some really good examples here, things like signing up to the Let's Go Zero campaign, you know, Hannah's talked a lot about this idea of the Ministry of Eco-Education approach of really embedding it within the curriculum. We've also got aspects of an outdoor curriculum learning week, just as a starter. You know, that's the sort of thing that then can build. One of the questions that has come through a couple of times now, though, is there a really good starting point? Is there something that each of our speakers or each of the panelists wanted to sort of suggest is a really good beginning to start schools on their journey? Is there something that through your experiences you've found is a really good first step? So for someone who knows about this, maybe is attending this today, this discussion, but isn't quite sure where to start, is there something that you would advise them to do to begin? So David, I don't know if you wanted to start us off.
Well, one thing that I found useful when working with schools is that they do a lot of sustainability without having that label put on it. And I would advise anyone to have a look at that. And it might be, I mean, like Hannah's example of using certain aspects of the curriculum to promote sustainability, or it might be a case of developing part of the school grounds, or it might be making your school more energy efficient and linking it to the curriculum. I think it's good to have a look at what you might be doing already and then capitalize on it rather than thinking you've got to start from scratch. And I think, Ofsted has this sort of deficit model where they come in and they tell you what's wrong with you, and then you're supposed to then have actions to put it right. Well, in some ways, it's arguing the other way and saying, well, what are you doing right now and how could you make it even better? And build on strengths rather than thinking that you've got a weakness. So those are the sorts of things which spring to mind.
Okay, Hannah, do you want to take us next?
Yeah, I think building on for that, I think it's really important to look at what you're actually doing now and building on that rather than trying to do everything at once. And I think making little steps is really important. I mean, last year we won the Great Yorkshire Show Veg Box competition. And what I was saying is our school is not like Mr. McGregor's garden. We've kept it so it's manageable and so it's purposeful. So doing things like that, I think is really important, you know. And like you say, schools do a lot of things that are sustainable, but they don't probably sometimes realize they're doing it as well. So I know, especially in early years, if you think of all the loose parts, junk modeling, you're doing all the time, the recycling, you know, it is already there, and it's about sort of harnessing it and building on it.
Oh, great. And Jack, what's your one tip, your sort of tangible thing that would be a really good starting point?
I think from what I found was when I started, you know, it was three of us and my science teacher, Miss Leonard, and we just had a really small goal of get some recycling bins in our restaurant. It's having these really small goals from a student perspective of I want to do this thing, and then once you realize you can do that, it's okay, what can we do next? It's building upon this. You know, our original dream was just some bins, and then we ended up having, I think it was 500 solar panels fitted, and creating a strategy for our trust. You know, it's starting small, I think, is the best way to go, and then you are almost certain of success.
Great, I think that's really good advice. And I guess also that idea of communicating the positive actions and the outcomes and making sure that people understand the good things that are happening, and that really helps build momentum.
I think if I can just mention as well, or re-mention the C word of courage. And I think we can't mess about anymore now, really. We could wait for incremental change, but in some ways that's not good enough now. And I think if you've got a bit of courage behind you, and you can, as we've said, convince senior leaders, then by starting small, you can quickly build up a momentum that will then produce radical change, because that's what we need. We haven't got the time for incremental change indefinitely. That's the thing. But having the C word of courage, whether you're a student or a teacher, let alone a leader, I think that's key, really. Put your head above the parapet.
Yeah, was there anything else, Jack and Hannah, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we sort of close?
No, not really. I mean, for me, it's about getting the children out in nature and getting the children to love the world around them. And some of them might not have ever had that experience, and they might not have ever had a role model that also loves the world around them. And I think sort of building that relationship with families, you know, engaging with them on things like tapestry or jigsaw, whatever you might use in early years and through school, I think is really important. Getting parents into school now, because it is a lot safer to do that, and just really running with it. And you know, there's nothing more exciting than a 3-year-old digging up the first potatoes that have grown, because they never expect to see all those potatoes under the soil. So I think just harnessing those passions for the outdoors in the children and getting families involved, I think is really important.
Excellent. And Jack, is there anything else? Okay, well, are you still there, Jack?
Just to explain, so Jack's doing work experience. He's currently in a primary school in Bristol, and I think there's might be some issues with the Wi-Fi.
Great. And I have seen there's a couple of other questions, but what we're going to do is just close. And I know that David was keen. I'm just going to bring up the book again. What we're going to do is, I think we have a discount code that we're going to send out. So if you've not read the book already, we're going to send that out to everyone who's attended so that you can purchase a copy of this. Hopefully it's inspired you if you haven't read it. But I also know that David was particularly keen to challenge everyone on this call. So just as he was sort of suggesting there, the way that there's an urgency around this. We need to kind of affect change as quickly as possible. And David, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, did you want to just have a word? We were sort of suggesting maybe that people might want to communicate one key idea from the book to a friend or a colleague and get another school signed up.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I think if everyone did that, even all the people who are here can cause all sorts of butterfly effects, which I talk about in the book. Everyone can do it. You know, you can be the change as an individual. Better to be in combination, but everyone can make a difference, and not to feel powerless. So I think you're thinking about one particular thing you can do as soon as possible. You'll be amazed what the effect it can have. Yeah, go for it. That's all I can say, really.
Great. So,
and it'd be nice for people to let me know, or perhaps Paul know, what they actually do on the back of the discussion we've had today, because that would be really a powerful message in itself. If we could collate all those and say, well, okay, well, from this modest get together, we have instigated XYZ change.
So exactly that, David. What we're going to do is after the call, I'm going to send out a link to the slides, the discount code, and also the Jamboard. And we want to use that as a way to hold you to account. And obviously, you know, Jess and I are going to say, the easy things that you could do at the moment is sign up to the UKSSN and get involved in terms of organising on a kind of regional network basis. And of course, we can support you through the Ministry of Eco-Education to embed this within your curriculum. And we've got all these sorts of resources that we've collated from a variety of different organisations to help you. So thank you so much for attending. And I hope you've enjoyed today. We will also, I'll share a link to the recording as well if you want to be able to share that with anyone else. So thank you and have a good rest of the day.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.